Original post. My ex left us without explanation and showed up over 2 years later, expecting everything to be as usual. I met my former partner Jessica when I was 24 years old and she was 21. We fell in love quickly and were together for 7 years. The first few years were good. We moved in together, enjoyed our life, and after 3 years, we had our son, Benjamin. It was a huge moment for both of us. I remember how we sat down and planned out our future, how we would raise him, and the values we wanted to instill in him. I felt like we were on our way to becoming a real family. But when Benjamin was 4 years old, meaning I was 28, Jessica disappeared without a trace. It all happened so fast. I came home one day, and she was gone. There wasn't even a note left on the kitchen table. No goodbyes, no explanation, no phone call. Her phone was turned off. I didn't understand anything and became worried that something serious had happened. I contacted the police after a day or so when I realized she really didn't plan to return. It was entirely unlike her not even to tell someone, so I feared the worst. The police, of course, opened a missing person report. They questioned me several times. What I wasn't prepared for, but now understand in hindsight, is that suspicion often falls first on the closest partner. So, I became their focus. They interrogated me about everything. When I last saw her, if I knew anything about her potential contacts with someone else, if we had fought and so on. It was an incredibly stressful situation for me. I was worried about Jessica, worried about how I would explain this to our son, and constantly felt under the watchful eye of the police. They didn't outright accuse me of anything, but it was clear they suspected me. And Jessica's parents were entirely convinced that I had done something to harm her or was somehow responsible for her disappearance. I understand that as a parent, you want to find an explanation when your daughter just vanishes. At the same time, their accusations against me were incredibly heavy to bear. They openly showed their hostility toward me. Not only had I become the sole caretaker for Benjamin and was living a nightmare of worry and despair, but I was also subjected to suspicious looks and direct attacks from her family. Our son was also affected by all of this, directly or indirectly. It happened more than once that he came home from school, saying one of Jessica's relatives had tried to pick him up and had spoken badly about me. I tried to keep my composure, but that entire period was horrific. I honestly didn't know how I would manage to care for Benjamin alone, but at the same time, he was my driving force to get up in the morning. Even though I was questioned multiple times, the police didn't find anything pointing to me. They simply didn't find any traces at all, whether of her being a victim of a crime or being elsewhere. Eventually, her case became one of many where a person is reported missing and never found. She ended up on the missing persons list. For a long time, I continued to hope. I didn't know exactly what I was hoping for, just that she would return or contact us somehow. But as time passed, the police moved on to other cases. I did my best to move on too, for Benjamin's sake. I can't say it was an easy period in my life, but I managed to be a good parent despite everything. Benjamin is my everything. Even though I was sad, disappointed, worried, and filled with guilt, I kept asking myself if I should have seen any warning signs before she left. Life went on. Benjamin needed me, and I was determined to provide him with as much stability as I could. My relationship with Jessica's parents initially worsened because they kept accusing me. But over time, everything calmed down. We never spoke directly, but at least they stopped spreading rumors about me. Benjamin and I built a life together. I arranged daycare, later school, worked as best as I could, and tried to ensure he wouldn't suffer more than necessary from his mother's absence. I'll admit there were times when I thought she might have chosen to leave us, but I pushed those thoughts away whenever they surfaced. I preferred to believe that something inexplicable had happened, beyond anyone's control. But I think, deep inside, I began to accept after about a year that she wasn't coming back. It was a grieving process for me, and I believe Benjamin had his own grieving process in his way. He missed his mother, but slowly began to adjust to her absence in our daily life. Eventually, my life became a bit more stable. I was fortunate to have a supportive family around me. My parents helped a lot with childcare and emotional support. I remember one day realizing that I wanted to start dating again, though it took a long time before I actually did. I also felt a lot of fear about letting someone new into our lives. But finally, about 8 months ago, I met a woman named Hannah. We were introduced through a mutual friend. I was 30 then, and life began to brighten. Hannah and I hit it off right away. She already knew about my situation, but I told her everything she wanted to know. We took things slowly and carefully. When Hannah eventually met Benjamin, it was the first time I introduced a new partner to my son. It was nerve-wracking, but he liked her immediately. Over these past 8 months, Hannah and I have grown very close. She is kind, funny, and warm. She has embraced Benjamin as if he were her own without trying to replace Jessica. She has been very careful not to overstep in his life as a new mom. Still, they've grown close. Benjamin looks up to her. For the first time in a long while, I started to feel truly happy again. When I was 24 and newly in love with Jessica, I never thought I would end up in a situation where I was trying to explain to my 4-year-old son why his mom didn't come home. But life is unpredictable, and just when I finally started to find joy in my daily life again, something I never thought would happen, happened. Jessica came back. This literally happened a few days ago. I was home, having left work early that day, and suddenly there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw Jessica. I was shocked. I could barely believe my eyes. I couldn't say a word while she quietly greeted me and said, "Hi, William." She looked completely run down, disheveled. Nothing like how I remembered her. I felt myself go completely cold inside. 2.5 years had passed since she disappeared. I stood there frozen, and she just walked past me into the hallway after we exchanged greetings. Then she started asking about Benjamin, where he was. I told her he was with my parents and that my girlfriend would be picking him up later. She went quiet and asked if I had a girlfriend. When I said yes, she asked why I was so quick to move on. It was then I realized something was off. She seemed strange, avoiding any talk about herself, but full of expectations for me. She essentially accused me of moving on. I tried to stay calm, but inside, I was both shocked and furious. I asked her repeatedly where she had been, but she wouldn't answer. She gave vague replies, saying it didn't matter. I was frustrated because I had so many questions. What had happened? Had she been in danger? Why hadn't she contacted anyone? I also mentioned everything I had endured during her absence, all the accusations I had faced. She didn't address any of that and just kept insisting she wanted to see Benjamin. I got angry. I told her she couldn't just show up after 2.5 years and expect nothing to have changed. I told her to go to her parents and tell them she was alive and that I'd get in touch once I figured out what to do. Still, she demanded to see him immediately, but I refused. I didn't trust her, not at that moment. She even tried to hug me, but I backed away. I asked her to leave. Eventually, she left reluctantly. Then I stood there, overwhelmed by 1,000 emotions, confused, angry, and utterly exhausted. I decided I needed to talk to Hannah as soon as she got home with Benjamin. I also thought I needed to call the police and let them know Jessica was no longer missing since she was still on their list. I wasn't sure what to tell Benjamin, but I knew I'd have to explain things to him sooner or later. Update 1. Some time has passed since Jessica first showed up. It still feels surreal that she's actually back. I talked to Hannah as soon as she came home with Benjamin that afternoon. Hannah is a strong person, but I could see how shocked she was. Her initial reaction was anger, that Jessica had just barged in and started making demands. Hannah said she thought it was outrageous that Jessica even tried to hug me and seemed disappointed that I didn't push her away sooner. But I was in shock and barely able to think. Hannah understood that. We stayed up late that evening talking. I also brought up the question of how we should tell Benjamin. He's been through so much sorrow and worry regarding his mother. During the worst period, right after Jessica disappeared, he cried often at night and kept asking why she wasn't coming home. I had no good answers then. I explained to Hannah that I was afraid Benjamin might get false hope now that she was back, and that if she disappeared again, it could destroy him completely. Hannah agreed that we needed to be careful, but at the same time, this wasn't something we could hide from him. He needed to know the truth. When we told Benjamin that his mom had reappeared, he was overjoyed at first. It was a reaction we had expected. He smiled, laughed, shouted "Mom," and ran around like he had just received the best news in the world. I think he had long nurtured a dream that she would come back, and everything would go back to the way it was. But after the initial happiness wore off, the questions started pouring in. Where has she been? Why did she leave me? Why didn't she contact us? I couldn't answer any of them. Not a single one. Eventually, I noticed how he started to feel sad and anxious. His cheerful mood disappeared, and I could see his thoughts starting to weigh on him. One thing he brought up was his relationship with Hannah. He said he felt guilty because he had started to see Hannah as a mother figure. Most of his conscious life has been without Jessica. Recently, he had even called Hannah mom a few times in passing. I think he had been longing for a maternal figure, and Hannah has been the one to step in and care for him. Now, with his biological mother suddenly back, he was overwhelmed by emotions. He didn't fall asleep until late that night. He just kept talking and talking, wondering, and occasionally crying. Finally, he fell asleep from sheer exhaustion, right in the middle of a sentence. Hannah was also deeply affected emotionally. She told me I needed to confront Jessica more firmly, ask her where she had been, why she came back now, and what she really wanted. Hannah was upset that Jessica could just show up and disrupt our lives this way, especially without offering any explanations. I agreed that I wanted answers, but my mind was still in chaos. Hannah insisted that I should call Jessica and arrange a meeting to discuss everything properly. So, I called the police to report that Jessica was no longer missing. Then I called Jessica and told her I wanted to meet her alone first, without Benjamin. I needed answers to my questions before I could even think about letting her see him. Jessica wasn't happy about this proposal. She wanted to see him right away, but I stood my ground. She reluctantly agreed to meet me alone, even though she protested. We set a time and place. It was decided we'd meet at a cafe a bit away from where I live, as I felt I needed to be on neutral ground. Update 2. The meeting with Jessica has taken place, and honestly, I don't even know how to describe it except as a complete disaster. I had mentally prepared myself to ask straightforward questions and not let my emotions distract me. I was determined to find out why she disappeared, where she had been, and why she never contacted anyone. For me, this wasn't just about myself. It was about knowing if she was stable and trustworthy before allowing her back into Benjamin's life. When we met at the cafe, Jessica seemed unwilling to answer anything. I asked question after question, but she either dodged them or said things like, "It doesn't matter," or "I don't want to talk about it." It was incredibly frustrating. I told her that if she didn't give me answers, I couldn't allow her to see Benjamin. I don't know who she is anymore or what she's been up to. How could I trust that she wouldn't just take him and leave again? There are no guarantees. She got upset and started talking about her rights as a mother, saying she had a right to see her child. I countered by reminding her that I have sole custody. When she vanished and didn't contact anyone, I took responsibility for everything, and eventually, I was granted full custody. I told her she couldn't just waltz back in and dictate how things should be. She raised her voice, almost yelling at me. I tried to stay calm, but eventually, I stood up to leave. That's when she panicked and begged me to stay. She pleaded with me, and I sat back down, telling her I wasn't going to sit there and be yelled at. I wanted clear, honest answers. Finally, some of the truth came out, not because she wanted to open up, but because I told her I would leave otherwise. Something inside her broke, and she admitted that she had been unfaithful to me for years before she disappeared. She met another man, and they planned to run away together. She wanted to start a new life with him, so she left me and Benjamin without a word. She said she didn't contact anyone because she didn't want to be found. I sat there, frozen with a cold feeling washing over me. I had suspected she might have been unfaithful, but I never imagined she would abandon her own child for it. She continued, saying they moved to Florida to start over, but the relationship eventually fell apart. Her lover had thrown her out after she, in turn, had cheated on him. She had nowhere to go, no money, no job. She had been drifting around, trying to find work, but nothing lasted. Finally, she decided to return here. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, disgust, and disappointment, not just for my sake, but especially for Benjamin's. How could someone abandon their child to start over with a lover and then, when everything falls apart, come back and demand to be a mother again? I told her outright that I didn't trust her. I explained that I wouldn't grant her any rights until she proved she was a stable person capable of taking responsibility. I gave her a list of conditions. First, no unsupervised visits with Benjamin. I wasn't going to risk her taking him and disappearing again. Second, she needed to show up looking presentable. Right now, she looked completely run down, and I didn't know if she had issues with substance abuse or if she was just struggling. Third, she had to get a job. I wouldn't allow her to drift through life without an income. And fourth, she needed to secure housing. Being homeless and living in unstable conditions wasn't acceptable if she wanted to see Benjamin. If she could meet these requirements, we could discuss unsupervised visits in the future. But I made it clear I would never share custody with her again. Never. She was furious, but I stood firm. I told her these terms weren't negotiable. She shouted, calling me heartless. I replied that she was the one who left her child. After some time, she went quiet and stared down at the table. Eventually, she said she understood but hoped I would soften over time. I told her the only thing I cared about was protecting Benjamin. Everything else was irrelevant to me now. Then I got up and left. Update 3. It's been about 2 weeks since the cafe meeting with Jessica. I've learned that she moved back in with her parents. Apparently, there was a lot of tension when the truth came out. Her parents had spent years believing I had something to do with her disappearance and hated me for it. Now, they found out that she left me and Benjamin for another man and kept it hidden. I actually received a sincere "we're sorry" from her parents, which felt good in a way, even though the damage was already done. I've spent countless sleepless nights dealing with their accusations. Still, it's a relief that they now know the truth. Jessica has seen Benjamin once during these 2 weeks. I had several discussions with him beforehand. I explained that I didn't want to expose him to risks and that we would meet in a neutral location, with either me or Hannah present. He was nervous at first, but ultimately wanted to meet her. When they saw each other, it was a bit tense. Benjamin has grown a lot since he was 4 years old. He's now a thoughtful and smart 7-year-old. He was polite, but I could see in his eyes that he barely recognized her. I think Jessica was hurt that he didn't throw himself into her arms, but she has to understand the consequences of her actions. She's been gone for over 2 years without so much as a word. We all sat together, me, Hannah, Jessica's parents, and of course, Benjamin. Most of the conversation was between Jessica and Benjamin. He seemed curious about her, but kept a certain distance. Afterward, he told me it felt strange because he remembered his mom as someone who disappeared. Now she's back, but to him, she's a stranger. He even used the word stranger. I was surprised at how maturely he processed everything for his age. Jessica, on the other hand, was devastated after the meeting. She sent me a message later, saying she understood she had hurt him deeply. Her parents told me she was very emotional about it, but there's not much I can do about that now. My priority has to be Benjamin. Jessica has also shown noticeable jealousy toward me and Hannah. She's made comments about how I already have a new wife, her words, and how quickly I moved on. I reminded her that she disappeared without a trace. What did she expect? I waited for almost 2 years, left in limbo and emotional pain. The fact that I even found the strength to start a new relationship is nothing short of a miracle. I told her plainly that I'm happy with Hannah and don't want anything else. Jessica has hinted that she still loves me, but I made it clear that it doesn't matter to me. If it weren't for Benjamin, I would have cut her out entirely, but now I have to navigate this situation for his sake. I also told her that if she can't stop with these kinds of remarks, this arrangement won't continue. I have no romantic feelings for her whatsoever. Update 4. This situation feels so strange now. We've had a couple of supervised visits where either Hannah or I were present. I've been upfront with Jessica, telling her it's because I don't trust her and want a witness in case she tries to twist anything. Jessica accuses me of being paranoid, but the fact is, she essentially kidnapped herself out of our lives before. I'm not taking any risks when it comes to Benjamin. I don't know if or when I'll ever be able to trust her again, but right now, I feel far from that point. Jessica's parents have said they want to help her get a job and a place to live. Their relationship with her is still complicated, but they're her parents, after all. I'm glad she's no longer homeless, because the thought of Benjamin's biological mother having nowhere to go didn't sit right with me. However, I'm not going to bend on this. She needs to prove she can be stable and responsible before I allow her more freedom with Benjamin. Benjamin has been relatively calm since their first meeting. He wants to keep seeing his mom, but is emotionally cautious. He doesn't run to her shouting "Mom" anymore. Hannah has been an incredible support to him, and I'm grateful for her presence. She's also warned me to be careful not to let Jessica manipulate us. I'm convinced Jessica feels regret now and wants to find a way back to her old life, but I can't just fling open the doors for her. So, this is where we stand now, what I call the new normal. I have a 7-year-old son, a wonderful girlfriend, and an ex who left us for another man, but has now returned and wants a relationship with our child. I'm trying to do what's right while also protecting Benjamin. I can't tell if Jessica is genuine in her desire to be there for him, or if she's acting out of desperation because she has no other options. I've made it very clear that custody remains with me, and that's not up for negotiation. I wrote this post to share what's happened. It's a long story, but I felt I needed to lay out the background for anyone reading this to understand how broken this situation has been. I'm considering whether I should demand that Jessica agrees to family therapy or something similar if she wants more time with Benjamin. I think it could help to have a professional third party mediate and support, given all the emotions and conflicts involved. She hasn't shown much willingness to talk things through so far, so I doubt she'd agree. But I can't continue in this tense and uncertain situation either. At the same time, I want to set boundaries. Jessica can't think she can come in and dictate terms. Hannah supports me in this. Jessica's parents have apologized, but are still in a turbulent situation with their daughter. Benjamin is confused, but also hopeful in some ways. I think he wants a mother in his life, no matter what she's done. And I'm torn between my anger toward Jessica and my wish for our son to have both parents if it can be done safely. I guess I just needed to get this off my chest. This isn't something you can easily bring up in casual conversation. I'd appreciate any advice or thoughts anyone might have. Has anyone else been in a similar situation? How did you handle it when the other parent showed up after being gone for so long? How did you build trust or deal with the possibility that trust might never be rebuilt? I'm not afraid of being hurt, but I am terrified of what it might do to Benjamin if she lets him down again.
If you liked this story, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It helps a lot, and you won't miss out on any future stories. Take care and live your best life.